I was 76 years old the morning I realized my grandson, Tyler, had taken every last dime of the $90,000 I'd set aside for my final years. It was January 12th, 2023, cold enough in Dayton, Ohio that my windows had frost on the inside, and my knees felt like they were packed with gravel. I remember because I was standing right at my kitchen counter, squinting at my online bank statement on that old Dell laptop my daughter insisted I keep, even though the thing ran like it was pushing molasses uphill. At first I thought maybe I clicked something wrong. You know how screens jump around, but then I scrolled again and again. That balance $90,412.55 was gone, just gone, replaced by a number so small it felt like an insult. You're probably thinking I shouted or slammed something or called the bank right away. Truth is, I just stood there feeling heat crawl up the back of my neck. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't fear. It was something uglier, something heavier, like someone had pressed a cinder block right onto my chest. Because in my bones, before I saw the withdrawals, before I traced the dates, I already knew who did it. The boy used to sit on my lap when he was 4, turning the steering wheel of my old Ford F-150 pretending he was driving to the moon. I taught him how to throw a baseball, how to tie fishing flies, how to gut a trout without tearing the meat. I helped pay for his welding certification when he quit college. When his mother, my daughter, begged me to give him just a little help to get him started in life, I always caved. But somewhere along the way, between the new girlfriend, the sudden taste for expensive clothes, and that cocky little sideways smile he developed, Tyler grew into a young man who believed he deserved whatever he laid his hands on. Still, money disappearing is one thing. Seeing the transactions, that was something else. The transfers were neat, spaced out across 2 weeks. $15,000, $20,000, $8,500, $12,000. Each one sent to an account I didn't recognize, an account tied to a phone number I did recognize. His. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out my old Timex watch, and tapped it against my wrist like I used to when I was trying to steady my nerves back on the Ford assembly line. Same feeling in my chest too, that sense that if I didn't breathe slow and controlled, something inside me might snap. When I finally called the bank, the woman on the line asked me if I'd authorized the transfers. "No, ma'am," I said. "I'm looking at $90,000 missing." "Sir, we can investigate fraud, but if the person had access to your accounts." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Because the world doesn't see it as fraud when it's family. That afternoon, I drove over to Tyler's place on Linden Avenue. Little duplex, peeling paint, pickup truck on blocks kind of street. He came out of the door with that loose, lazy grin like nothing in the world bothered him. "Hey, Pops," he said, leaning against the railing. "You okay? You look pale." I studied his face, how he wouldn't quite meet my eyes, how his shoulders tightened when he crossed his arms. "I'm missing some money," I said, "a lot of money." He shrugged too quickly. "I mean, things happen. Maybe you clicked something weird online." "Tyler," I said quietly, "don't insult me." The grin disappeared. His jaw twitched. He muttered, "Well, maybe you shouldn't leave your passwords written down." My heart dropped right through my shoes. "You went into my desk." He lifted his hands like it was nothing. "Relax, Pops. You weren't gonna use all that anyway." It took everything in me not to put my fist through the side of his truck. I felt a tremor in my hand, the kind that comes with age and anger. I turned, walked back to my car, and drove home with my teeth clenched so tight my jaw ached. And here's the thing I didn't expect. That night, lying in bed with the hum of the old space heater filling the room, I didn't feel sad, or betrayed, or confused. I felt something else. A cold, steady resolve I hadn't felt since my working days. The kind that builds slow, like coals warming under ash. The kind that makes a man take inventory of what strength he has left and what he's willing to do with it. Because Tyler was wrong about one thing. I wasn't done yet. And 6 months later, when the moment was right, I struck back in a way he never saw coming. But I'll tell you how that started, how the whole plan took shape in the next part. Before everything fell apart, before the cold January morning when I stared at my empty bank account, my life had settled into a quiet rhythm. Not perfect, hell, nothing's perfect at 76, but steady. Predictable in the way an old house is. The floorboards creak where they've always creaked. The furnace clanks awake around 5:30 every morning, and the mail shows up at the exact moment Judge Judy comes on. I lived alone in that little brick house on Kammer Avenue, the one my late wife, Mary, and I bought in '84 for $38,000, a number that sounds like a typo today. She kept a rose garden out front. I tried keeping it up after she passed in 2017, but the blooms never looked the same. Not even close. I guess some things don't survive a change in hands. Most days started the same. I shuffled into the kitchen, turned on the percolator, and sat by the window watching the neighbor kids wait for the school bus. Winters in Dayton smell like exhaust and wet pavement, but in the mornings, before the trucks start roaring down Salem Avenue, it's quiet enough to hear your own breath. I liked that. It reminded me I was still here. You might be wondering why Tyler had access to my account in the first place. That's the part that stings the most, the part where I look back and see all the little decisions that added up to disaster. See, after Mary died, the kids hovered around like moths. Nice enough, but you could hear the worry in their voices. Dad, are you eating? Dad, do you need help with the bills? Dad, maybe we should talk about assisted living someday. Someday, the word hung in the air like a storm cloud. Tyler was the one who visited most. Funny, right? The same boy who'd later clean me out used to swing by every other Sunday with a bag of Wendy's and a smile that felt genuine back then. Gotta check on you, Pops, he'd say, dropping fries onto a paper plate. Someone's gotta make sure you're not living off canned beans. I'll admit it warmed me. I wasn't used to attention from a 22-year-old. Most kids that age don't want to sit on a sagging couch with an old man watching the Bengals lose again. He'd help me with the TV remote, fix the Wi-Fi when it acted up, carry salt bags for the driveway. Little stuff, harmless stuff. And every time he helped me log into something, Medicare, Social Security, my credit union, he'd say, "Here, Pops, let me save your password in case you forget." I should have said no. God, I should have said no. But when you're old and the world keeps updating and shifting and changing every 5 seconds, it's easy to lean on the one person who doesn't treat you like a burden. One Sunday he asked, "You got savings somewhere for emergencies?" "Course I do," I told him. "Your grandma and I were careful people." "How much?" he asked. I laughed it off, enough to bury me proper. He laughed too, but it wasn't the same kind of laugh. Eyes stayed flat. I remember that now. Back then, though, I missed it, or maybe I didn't want to see it. I wasn't just a grandfather. I was a lonely old man who thought he still had family in his corner. And Tyler, he knew it. There was a moment, a small one, that should have warned me. Sometimes the biggest red flags feel like nothing when they first wave. It was late September, leaves starting to fall. I'd just gotten the furnace serviced and was grumbling about the bill. Tyler walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and said, "You ever think about, I dunno, streamlining?" I frowned. "Streamlining what?" "Your accounts," he said, shrugging. "Consolidate everything into one place so it's easier for me, for you to keep track of." I chuckled. "I've managed this long." He closed the fridge a little too hard. "Yeah, well, just saying you won't be 76 forever." The way he said it, sharp, impatient, pricked at me. But he followed it with, "Sorry, Pops, long day," and gave me that crooked grin, and the moment melted. I let it melt. You know what the hardest part is? Realizing how much trust you gave someone simply because you loved their parents, because you watched them learn to walk, because you held them when they cried. That love blinds you in ways you don't see until the damage is already done. If you asked me then who Tyler was, I'd have said, a good kid with some rough edges, bit lost, needs guidance. If you ask me now, well, you'll see. Because everything I just told you, the quiet mornings, the trust, the small warning signs, that all fed into what came later, into the 6 months I spent clawing my way back from that betrayal, into the plan that formed piece by piece until it became something sharp enough to cut. And in the next part, I'll tell you about the first crack, the moment I realized the ground wasn't as steady as I once thought. The first crack, the moment I should have known something in my world was shifting, didn't happen the day the money vanished. It happened months before, in early October, on one of those gray Ohio afternoons where the clouds sit low and heavy, like they're thinking about dropping snow but can't quite commit. I was in my living room fixing the latch on the old wooden cabinet Mary used to keep her good dishes in. The TV was on low, some rerun of Gunsmoke, and the house smelled like the chicken soup I'd started on the stove. I remember because the garlic was starting to burn, and I kept telling myself to get up and stir it. But my knees were giving me hell that day, and I was halfway through muttering about the weather being the reason when I heard the creak of the front porch. Didn't think much of it, thought it was the mailman. Then Tyler let himself in. He didn't knock. He didn't even call out. Just walked in like he owned the place. "Hey, Pops," he said, breezing past me with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you won't get scolded. "What's for lunch?" He lifted the lid on the soup. "Smells burnt." I was about to stir it, I grumbled, easing myself up. "What are you doing here on a Thursday?" He shrugged, "Just checking in." But something was off. His eyes were darting around, not nosy exactly, but hunting, taking inventory. The way a mechanic scans a car for the easy fixes and the pricey problems. He walked down the hallway toward my bedroom without asking. "Where you going?" I called after him, trying to keep my voice steady. "Bathroom," he said. But the bathroom was the other direction. My stomach tightened. You ever get that prickly feeling between your shoulder blades, the one that whispers something's wrong? That's what I felt, standing there with a wooden spoon in my hand and a burning pot of soup behind me. I moved slower than I wanted, but I followed him. He wasn't in the bathroom. He was in my bedroom. More specifically, he was standing over my desk, the drawer that sticks if you don't pull it just right, already halfway open. When he heard me step into the room, he jerked upright. "Oh, he scratched the back of his neck. "I was looking for a pen." There were pens in the kitchen, pens in the jar by the phone, pens in the living room. There was no earthly reason he needed one from that drawer. But I didn't accuse him, not then. That's what trust does. It makes you swallow your instincts and wrap them in excuses. "Next time," I said, trying to sound light, "ask." He flashed that grin, the one where his mouth smiled but his eyes didn't move an inch. "Sure thing, Pops." Then he walked out, too quickly, like a man leaving a room with something in his pocket he didn't want to explain. The second crack came 2 weeks later, late October. Leaves all over the yard, the kind that stick to your boots when it rains. I was at the kitchen table, writing out a grocery list when my phone buzzed. I squinted at the screen. Password change request. I hadn't asked for one. Before I could process it, Tyler called. "Hey, Pops," he said, sounding a little too cheerful. "You get an email from the bank, just ignore it." "Why would I ignore it?" I asked. "Oh, it was a glitch. I was helping you fix that login issue you had last month, remember? Might have triggered something." I hadn't asked him to fix anything last month. But my mind, well, it wasn't as quick as it used to be, and doubt slips into the cracks age leaves behind. "You sure?" I asked. "Positive," he said. "I've got it handled." Handled. That word stuck to me like burrs on a flannel shirt. But again, I let it slide. Because if there's one thing older folks get good at, it's doubting ourselves more than we doubt the people around us. The third crack wasn't small at all. It was practically a warning siren. Late November, Thanksgiving week, Tyler stopped by again. He was jittery, foot tapping, checking his phone, talking a mile a minute. "Pops, do you still have that folder with your insurance stuff?" he asked. "Why?" "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "Mom mentioned you might want to, simplify things, just in case." "In case of what?" I asked, and my voice came out harder than I expected. He laughed, but it was thin and nervous. "Geez, I dunno, don't get touchy." "I'm asking a question," I said. Why are you so interested in my paperwork lately? He waved a hand. Old people get scammed all the time. I'm just keeping an eye out. Old people. Not you, not grandpa, not pops. Old people. And that's when I noticed something else. His backpack was unzipped, and from the corner of my eye, I saw the corner of a manila folder peeking out. My manila folder. The one I kept my bank statements in. My jaw clenched. Tyler, I said slowly, did you go through my desk again? He froze. Just for a second. Just long enough to confirm the answer. Then he smirked. Relax, you left it open. I always leave it closed. Well, he said, shrugging, maybe you forgot. Those 4 words. Maybe you forgot. They don't sound like much, but when you're past 70, they hit like an accusation. People start acting like your brain is a leaky faucet. And Tyler knew exactly what he was doing, making me question myself, planting seeds of doubt so he could slip into the gaps. But I didn't know then just how wide those gaps would get. Not until the day everything shattered. And I'll tell you exactly how that moment went. The precise instant I realized my grandson had crossed a line I could never uncross. You ever hear a sound so soft it shouldn't hurt, but it does? For me, that sound was a single click. The click a man hears when a door unlocks that shouldn't be unlocking. December 18th, 2022, a Sunday. I'd gotten home from Kroger with 2 bags of groceries and a half-frozen rotisserie chicken. Sky was that winter gray that makes everything look like an old photograph. My hands were cold, my back was stiff, and all I wanted was to warm up some mashed potatoes and fall asleep in my recliner. But as I stepped onto my porch, groceries digging into my fingers, I heard it. Clicking. Not loud, not dramatic, just wrong. My front door opening from the inside. My first thought was that maybe I hadn't closed it all the way. But then the door opened wider, and there he was, Tyler, standing in my living room like he was the one paying the mortgage. He froze when he saw me. I froze when I saw the desk drawer open behind him. What are you doing? I asked. My voice wasn't angry, it wasn't loud. It was a kind of quiet I didn't know I was capable of. He blinked fast. Oh, Pops, I was just, Mom sent me over to grab your Medicare card. She said you misplaced it again. I didn't, I said, and she wouldn't send you. Okay, he said, stepping back, raising his hands. Don't get weird about it. I locked that door, I said. He shrugged. You must have forgotten. There it was again. That damn phrase. I stepped into the house, setting the grocery bags down slowly, never taking my eyes off him. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, chewing his lip, glancing at the desk. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. The moment the bottom dropped out. A piece of paper stuck out from his jacket pocket, a folded sheet, white, with the corner of a credit union logo peeking out, my credit union. I walked toward him. Pops, he started, backing up. But I just held out my hand. Give it to me. He hesitated, just for a breath. Then he held up the paper. No, he said, moving it toward his back pocket. This is nothing. Tyler, I said, and something in my voice made him stop cold. Don't make me ask again. He swallowed, his jaw twitched, then he shoved the paper into my hand like it was burning him. I unfolded it. It wasn't a statement, it was a transaction confirmation. A withdrawal. $12,000. From my savings. 2 days earlier. My hands didn't shake at first. My throat didn't tighten. For a moment I felt absolutely nothing, like my body had gone hollow. Pops, it's not what you think, he said quickly. I'm gonna pay it back. I swear to God, I had this thing come up. When? I asked quietly. What? When were you going to tell me? I took a slow step forward. When you took all of it, or just most of it? He looked away, jaw working like he was chewing on lies. Then he snapped. You don't use the money anyway, he shouted. Why do you even need it? You just sit in this house. You just let it rot in the bank. I'm out here trying to build a life. I felt my heart thump once, hard, like it was warning me. "That's my money," I said. "Your grandmother and I saved every dime, every overtime shift, every Christmas bonus. That's my life in that account." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Yeah, well, maybe you should have thought about that before leaving it where anyone could get it." "I trusted you," I said. He rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting." "Get out," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Get out of my house." "Pops, come on. Now." I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice, but something about the way the words came out must have hit him differently. He stepped back, eyes narrowing, then scoffed. "You'll calm down," he muttered. "You always do." And he walked past me, brushing my shoulder like I was just an obstacle in a hallway, and let himself out. The door clicked shut behind him. For a long time I just stood there. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old kitchen clock and the sound of my breathing, too fast, too uneven. Then my legs gave. Just folded beneath me. I sat on the floor beside the groceries, the cold rotisserie chicken sweating in the plastic container, and I felt something inside me split. Not like a crack, not like a chip, but like a beam giving way in a collapsing house. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the truth, finally standing naked in front of me. My grandson didn't love me. He didn't respect me. He didn't even see me. I was just a bank he thought he could rob without consequences. And that night, lying awake with the ceiling fan spinning shadows around the room, I made myself a quiet promise. If he wanted a war, he'd get one. But it wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be chaotic. It would be methodical. Measured. 6 months. That's how long it would take to build what I needed. And next, I'll tell you about the descent. Those dark weeks where I had to face the full weight of what he'd done and decide what kind of man I still was. The weeks after I found that withdrawal slip weren't just hard. They were humiliating in a way a man my age doesn't recover from easily. You spend your whole life building yourself into someone steady, someone reliable, someone who keeps his family fed and his bills paid. And then, in a single swing, life knocks you down so far you feel like you're looking up from the bottom of a well. Christmas came and went without joy. My daughter, Lisa, insisted I come over for dinner, but I made excuses about my knees and the cold. Truth was, I couldn't look at her without thinking about her son, and I couldn't tell her, not yet. Not when I still wasn't sure how deep the damage ran. I needed facts before I broke her heart. Those were the days when the house felt too quiet. I'd find myself walking into a room and forgetting why. Not dementia, no, that wasn't it. It was grief. Grief ties your thoughts in knots. Grief makes you lose track of your own shadow. January rolled into February, and the cold got into my bones like it had a vendetta. My furnace rattled every time it kicked on. And the heating bill, well, I'll spare you the numbers, but it looked more like a mortgage payment than utilities. And I swear it felt like the house itself could sense my weakness. Pipes groaned. Floorboards popped. Every sound made me feel smaller, like I was 90 instead of 76. I wasn't eating much. I wasn't sleeping much either. But the worst part, I'd started questioning myself. That's what happens when someone you love manipulates you. Their voice doesn't leave when they walk out the door. It sticks in your head like a splinter. Maybe you forgot. Maybe you left it unlocked. Maybe you wrote the password down wrong. Maybe you're slipping, Pops. Some nights I'd stare at my bank account long after midnight, scrolling through transactions I already knew by heart. My mind would whisper, did I approve something? Did I misclick? Did I misread a date? It shames me to say it, but part of me wondered if Tyler was right, if maybe I was getting confused, if maybe this was what growing old really felt like. But then there were moments, little ones, when clarity cut through the fog. Like the night I was microwaving leftover chili, standing barefoot on cold linoleum, thinking about something my old foreman used to say. A man can be fooled, but a ledger never lies. I pulled out every printed bank statement from the past year, spread them across the kitchen table, sat there until the sun came up, chasing numbers with a pen until my fingers cramped. And the truth stared me right in the face. Tyler hadn't made one mistake. He'd planned it. One transfer always followed another. Amounts just under the threshold that triggers automatic review. He'd even spaced them on different days of the week. That wasn't confusion. That wasn't me forgetting. That was theft, calculated, intentional, practiced theft. Once that realization settled into my bones, something in me steadied. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't slipping. I wasn't some fragile old man whose memory was dissolving like wet paper. I was still me. But the hardest blow came from a direction I didn't expect. One afternoon in February, I drove to the credit union. It was a cold, brittle day, the kind where the wind cuts through your jacket like it's made of tissue paper. I walked up to the teller window, young man, probably 22, clean haircut, cheerful smile. He asked how he could help. I slid the withdrawal slip across the counter. "I didn't authorize this," I said. His smile faded. He typed something on his screen. "Sir," he said after a moment, "these withdrawals were made using correct login credentials." I swallowed. "I didn't make them." "Did someone else have access to your online banking?" Heat crawled up my neck. Shame again. That damned shame. "I don't think so," I said, but my voice cracked right down the middle. He looked at me the way young people sometimes look at old people, kind but doubtful. "Sir, if you're concerned about memory issues." "My memory is fine," I snapped. People turned. The sound of it echoed too much. The teller raised his hands gently. "Of course, sir. I didn't mean anything by it. It's just that we have many elderly customers who—" I felt like someone punched me in the gut. "Just print me everything," I said quietly, "every transfer." He did. And that stack of papers, the weight of it, felt like holding my own obituary. Walking out of that bank, the winter air slapped me across the face. My eyes watered, but not from the cold. I sat in my car for a long time, watching my breath fog the windshield, feeling smaller than I had in decades. The betrayal was one thing, but the humiliation, that was something else entirely. It sinks claws into you. And that night, when the house creaked and the wind rattled the windows, I asked myself a question no man wants to face. If my own grandson thinks I'm weak, maybe I am. But here's the thing about men like me. Men who grew up fixing our own appliances, patching our own roofs, stretching dollars until they cried. Weakness doesn't sit well. It itches. It festers. And eventually, it forces you to stand. The turning point came in early March, and it didn't come softly. It came from a person I never expected to play any part in this story. In the next part, I'll tell you about the gathering, the moment help arrived from the unlikeliest place, and the plan truly began to form. The person who ended up helping me wasn't family, wasn't a friend, wasn't even someone who'd known me longer than a few months. Funny how life works. Sometimes the people who pull you out of the hole aren't the ones you fed, clothed, or loved. They're the ones who just happen to be standing there when you finally stop pretending everything's fine. Her name was Rosa Martinez, a night shift nurse at the VA clinic over on West 3rd. I'd gone in for a routine appointment, a blood pressure check, refill on my arthritis meds, nothing special. My hands were stiff that morning, and I fumbled the clipboard. Papers slid off my lap and scattered across the waiting room floor like someone had dropped a deck of cards. Rosa swooped down before I could bend. "Don't you dare," she said with a little laugh. "Hips like yours, you'll be here under observation if you try." She had kind eyes, sharp though not the soft kind that missed details. She gathered the papers, paused when she saw the stress notes I'd written in the margins, little scribbles like find missing funds, call bank again, passwords, transactions, Tyler. She handed them back but didn't look away. "You doing okay?" she asked. I opened my mouth to lie, some canned line about stress and holiday bills, but what came out instead was, "My grandson stole $90,000 from me." That's how it began. She didn't laugh, didn't blink, Didn't give me the patronizing tilt of the head I'd come to expect whenever I tried telling anyone younger than 50 about my situation. She just pulled up a chair and sat across from me like we were old friends. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. Quietly, slowly, leaving nothing out. Every detail from the withdrawal slip to the break-in, from the bank teller's doubtful smile to the cold silence of my house afterward. She listened, hands folded, jaw tightening in little pulses when I reached certain parts. When I finished, the waiting room was almost empty. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm old. He's young. He knows my passwords, my accounts. Hell, half the time he talks to me like I'm halfway to memory care." Rosa leaned back, crossed her arms, and studied me. "That's not how you talk," she said. "What do you mean?" "You speak clearly. You remember details. You tell the story in order, sir. No disrespect, but there's nothing wrong with your mind." I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "It doesn't matter what I know," I said. "It matters what I can prove." Rosa gave a little smirk, one part sympathy, one part challenge. "Well, then let's prove it." What followed was the first moment in months where I felt like I wasn't drowning. Rosa wasn't some legal wizard or financial expert. She wasn't a cop or an investigator, but she knew people. VA clinics are like little cities, full of veterans, lawyers doing pro bono work, social workers who know loopholes you've never heard of. She told me to come back the next day, same time. "Wear something warm," she added. "We'll be walking between buildings." The next morning, she introduced me to a man named Daniel Keene, a veteran who worked part-time in admin and part-time, helping other vets navigate benefits. He was maybe late 60s, tall, mustache like a broom, and a voice that sounded like gravel being shoveled. Rosa filled him in. He listened, rubbing the bridge of his nose. When I finished, he said, "Well, hell." I nodded. "That's about the shape of it." Daniel leaned forward. "First thing we need is documentation. Not statements you printed yourself, official records directly from the bank. Chronological, time-stamped." "I asked for them," I said. "I've got a stack at home." "Then we'll sort them," he said. "Cross-reference every transfer, build a timeline." "That'll take days," I muttered. He smirked. "Good thing I've got time." Rosa chimed in. "And once we have proof of unauthorized access, there are legal aid programs that specialize in elder financial abuse. Quiet ones. Ones that don't require you to drag your whole family through the mud. Yet." That word. Yet. It stayed with me. For the first time in a long while, I felt something spark inside my chest. Something warm instead of cold. "This can work?" I asked. Rosa placed a hand on my arm. "It's going to work if you're willing to fight." I nodded. "Josette, I am." The next few weeks were a blur of quiet preparation. Daniel would come over with a yellow notepad, laying out papers on my kitchen table like we were charting the movements of an enemy army. He circled dates, marked patterns, highlighted suspicious logins. "See here," he said one afternoon, tapping a line on a February statement. "This login came from a device with a different IP address, not yours." I blinked. "I don't know how to find an IP." "That's the point," he said, "but your grandson does." Rosa visited after her shifts, sometimes at 9 at night, still in scrubs, bringing me sandwiches from the clinic cafeteria so I wouldn't live off canned soup and toast. "You're doing good," she'd say, "one step at a time." The house felt less empty when they were there, less haunted, less cold. Every night after they left, I'd sit at the table looking at the growing pile of evidence, my anger slowly sharpening into something focused, something useful. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a crime. And Tyler had left breadcrumbs all over the forest floor. We just needed someone who knew how to follow them. That someone arrived in early April, in the form of a woman who carried herself like she wrestled paperwork for sport. Attorney Margaret Chen, Legal Aid Society of Southwestern Ohio. Not tall, not loud, not flashy. But when she walked into my house with her binder and her laptop, even my old bones sat up straighter. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "I understand you've been wronged. I'm here to help you make it right." "Can we?" I asked. She glanced at the mountain of organized papers Daniel and Rosa had helped compile, the timeline pinned neatly on a poster board Daniel insisted we make. "Oh yes," she said. "Yes, I believe we can." That was the beginning of the setup, the moment the plan shifted from survival to strategy. And next, I'll tell you exactly how the setup began to take shape, the lies we let Tyler believe, the traps we started laying, and the steps we took to make sure he'd never see what was coming. By the time April rolled into May, the three of us, me, Rosa, and Daniel, had become something like a quiet little task force. And with attorney Margaret Chen stepping in, things shifted from gathering proof to building a plan. A real plan. Not just anger, not just fear. Strategy. "Revenge without evidence is just noise," Margaret told me during our first full meeting at my kitchen table. "Revenge with proof, that's justice." I liked the sound of that. The first thing Margaret did was spread out the entire timeline across my table: transfers, login timestamps, IP addresses, Tyler's visits, everything. She tapped each point with a blue pen like she was conducting an orchestra. "He thinks you're isolated," she said. Tab. "He thinks you're confused." Tab. "He thinks you'll never fight him." Tab. 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 Then she looked at me, really looked at me. "What we need," she said, "is for him to keep thinking exactly that." I felt a pulse of something almost like shame, like letting him believe I was weak meant admitting weakness. But Margaret saw it in my face. "This isn't pretending," she said gently. "This is positioning. You play the role he already believes you're in." Daniel chimed in. "You can't outpunch a kid his age, but you can outthink him." I nodded slowly. "So what do you need me to do?" And that's when the setup truly began. The first move was simple. I had to act normal around Tyler. Normal meaning defeated. Tired. Foggy. I had to play the role he assumed I'd grow into. A grandfather slipping mentally, unable to keep up, easy to manipulate. It tasted bitter, but I swallowed it. 2 weeks into April, I called him. "Tyler, it's Pops," I said in a shaky voice I didn't quite have to fake. "I'm having trouble logging into that bank account. Think you could help me out again?" He hesitated for half a second. I could hear the wheels turning, that greedy little hum. Then he said, "Yeah, sure, Pops, I'll come by Sunday." When he showed up, he had that same swagger. Cheap cologne, new sneakers, confidence dripping off him like oil. I left the desk drawer slightly open. Left a few bills scattered on the table. Left a notepad with scribbled passwords sitting just close enough to tempt him. He looked around the room like a contractor estimating a job. Same eyes as December. "You okay, Pops?" he asked, voice dripping false concern. "Just tired," I murmured, "forgetful." He smiled at that. He liked that. Rosa had warned me. He'll push harder once he thinks you're slipping. She wasn't wrong. He sat down at my computer, clicking, 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 frowning like he was helping, while his phone kept buzzing in his pocket. He clicked into my banking profile with an ease that made bile rise in my throat. "You should let me consolidate this stuff," he said. "Make it easier." "Oh well," I mumbled, "maybe soon, maybe." I needed him to think the door was still wide open. 3 days later, we met with Margaret again. She reviewed the hidden camera footage Rosa had helped me set up, just a little motion-triggered plug-in device that sat in the corner by the bookshelf. Tyler never noticed it. He didn't look at things unless he thought he could take them. The camera caught everything. Him logging into my accounts. Him photographing documents. Him muttering passwords to himself. Him pocketing one of my bank statements. When the clip ended, Margaret tapped her pen twice. "Good, very good, but not enough." I swallowed. "What else do we need?" "A recorded admission," she said, "or at least him demonstrating intent." I tensed. "You want me to confront him?" No, she said. I want you to let him think he's safe. Daniel folded his arms. He's gonna steal something else. Count on it. My stomach twisted. How can you be so sure? Daniel looked me dead in the eye. Because people like him, they always go back for more, especially when they smell weakness. And Daniel was right. By early May, small things started disappearing. A checkbook, a credit card statement, a property tax notice. Each time Tyler would shrug and say, "Old folks misplace stuff." With that same smirk, he'd probably used his whole life to get out of trouble. But now I had eyes on every inch of the house. Now every lie was captured. Rosa watched the clips with me when she stopped by after her shifts. "You're doing good," she said. "I know it's hard, but you're building a case he can't wiggle out of." "I just don't want him to know," I said. "He won't," she assured me. "He's too sure of himself." The next step was the hardest, luring him into accessing an account the attorney had set up specifically to catch him. Margaret created a decoy savings account under my name, legal, legitimate, but empty except for a $20 deposit so it appeared active. She showed me how to struggle with it in front of him. On May 21st, he came over again, set his keys on the table, scrolled on his phone, barely said hello. "I'm having trouble with that new account," I said softly, sliding the notepad toward him. He glanced at it with all the subtlety of a crow, eyeing a shiny object. "Give it here," he said. And right in front of the tiny camera hidden in the lamp base, he typed the login. He clicked View Balance. Saw the $20. Confusion flickered across his face. Then the hunger. "Why'd you open another account?" he asked. "Don't remember," I lied. He leaned back, that greedy gleam returning. 2 days later, the decoy account showed a login attempt from a device that wasn't mine. Margaret circled it on the printout and drew an arrow. "Now," she said, "we're ready for the next phase." I swallowed. "What's that?" She closed her folder, looked me straight in the eye. "The trap," she said. And that was when I understood. The setup was over. The trap was coming next. A trap 6 months in the making. One he'd walk right into, because he thought I was the same old man he'd stolen from in December. But he was wrong. And in the next part, I'll tell you exactly how the execution of that trap began, and how one small conversation would set the whole thing in motion. By the time June rolled in, thick, humid air hanging over Dayton like a wet blanket, the trap was set. 6 months of planning, documenting, pretending, and waiting had all led to one moment. And the moment wasn't loud or dramatic. No yelling, no confrontation, no threats. It started with something much quieter. A phone call. Margaret had coached me for 2 days. We rehearsed it at my kitchen table like a couple of actors in a low-budget play. The pauses, the hesitations, the way I'd let my voice wobble at the right moment. "Remember," she said, pointing her pen at me like it was a conductor's baton, "he has to think he's in control. He has to think you're desperate." Daniel chimed in from the recliner. "Desperate people make mistakes. He'll lean in, hard." And Rosa, well, she squeezed my hand and said, "You've got this. You're not the one who should be afraid." So that afternoon, with the windows open and the hum of cicadas buzzing through the screens, I dialed Tyler's number. He answered on the second ring. "Pops, hey, everything okay?" He always asked that, but never like he meant it. I let out a shaky breath, one that wasn't entirely an act. "Tyler, I need your help, again." He exhaled sharply, annoyance, entitlement, something in between. "Yeah, okay, what's going on now?" "Well, I'm trying to access that second account, the new one, the one you helped me with. I can't remember the password." A pause, a long one. Then there it was. The soft, satisfied tone of a wolf hearing a fence break. "Don't worry," he said smoothly. "I got you." I swallowed hard. "Could you come over? I don't want to mess anything up." He hesitated only long enough to make me feel the imbalance of power he thought he had. "Yeah, I'll swing by." It was Rosa who installed the second hidden camera for that day, this one in a fake air purifier near the corner of the living room. You sure this will work? I'd whispered. She nodded. Trust the process, trust yourself. Margaret arrived an hour before Tyler, dressed in a plain button-down and jeans, not lawyer attire, but casual, like a friend stopping by. She parked her car 3 blocks away and came in the back door. I'll be in the spare bedroom, she said. Keep the door cracked. I'll record everything from my phone as backup. Daniel arrived minutes later with 2 iced teas and a quiet smile. You ready? He asked. No, I said honestly, but I'm willing. That's enough, he said. And then, almost on cue, footsteps on the porch. Tyler. I felt my pulse in my throat. He walked in without knocking, as usual. Ball cap, gold chain, new shoes again. That same swagger. Hey, Pops, he said, looking around. You seem frazzled. I let my shoulders sag, let my voice tremble. I can't remember how to get into that new account, I said, rubbing my temples. I tried everything. He sighed dramatically and dropped into the chair at my desk. Okay, let me take a look. He clicked, and clicked, and clicked. Exactly as we needed. Let's see, what did you do wrong this time? I watched him lean forward, typing with the confidence of a man who believed the world owed him something. Then, he froze, just for a split second, because on the screen, sitting in plain view, was the bait Margaret had created. Pending transfer, $42,000 authorization required. It was fake, of course, just an interface built to look real, but it didn't need to function, it only needed to tempt him. What's this? He asked, trying to sound casual but failing. Oh, I don't know, I murmured. Some notice popped up, something about transferring money I didn't understand. His breathing changed. Shallow, quick. Why didn't you tell me about this account earlier? He murmured. I forgot, I said. Like you said, I forget things. He cracked a smile. Yeah, you do. Then he clicked Authorize Transfer. That was it. The moment the trap fully snapped shut. The cameras caught every second. The audio caught every word. His fingerprints were all over the keyboard. And then he said it, without even realizing the universe had placed a microphone directly under his chin. You won't even notice it's gone. I went still. Even Margaret from the back room sucked in a slow breath. But Tyler kept going, muttering to himself like a man measuring lumber. 42 grand, okay, that'll cover everything. Then louder. Yeah, Pops, I'll just authorize this for you. You can trust me, you always can. That sentence sealed his fate. My heart clenched, not with fear, not with panic, but with a grief so sharp it felt like biting into metal. Still, I nodded. Thank you, Tyler, I appreciate it. He grinned, clicked authorize, and didn't realize nothing would happen. The fake screen just refreshed, showing the same prompt. System must be glitching, he muttered. But we had what we needed. Evidence of intent. Evidence of access. Evidence of exploitation. Margaret stepped quietly into the hallway then, just close enough that I could see her silhouette but not enough for him to notice. She gave me a single nod. Everything was in place. Next came the moment I had been preparing for since December. The confrontation. Public. Official. Inescapable. And in the next part, I'll tell you exactly how that confrontation unfolded, how a courthouse waiting room, a trembling voice, and one final mistake brought everything crashing down around him. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. Not a wink. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan wobbling on its old bearings, listening to the house breathe around me. Dayton nights get quiet in summer, too quiet, just the hum of distant traffic on Salem Avenue and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. My chest felt tight, my mind racing in circles. Because the next morning wasn't just paperwork or a meeting. It wasn't a private conversation. It wasn't another quiet humiliation. It was the day my grandson would be forced to face what he'd done. In a room where lies couldn't save him. The evidence was packed in a neat binder Margaret had assembled. The printed timeline, the security logs, the camera screenshots, the transcript of his own words. His voice saying, "You won't even notice it's gone." That sentence echoed in my skull like a church bell. The Montgomery County Courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish, same as it had the last time I'd been there 20 years earlier to pay a traffic ticket. Rosa came with me, her hand steadying my elbow as we approached security. "You okay?" she whispered. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm ready." Margaret was already inside waiting, a calm storm in a navy blue suit. Daniel arrived minutes later, carrying coffee and a quiet nod that said everything he couldn't put into words. Then the glass doors swung open behind us. Tyler walked in. Clean haircut, expensive jacket, that same swagger. But something in his eyes was different, nervous, darting like he couldn't quite get enough air. "Pops," he said, confused, "what are you doing here?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy he used to be buried under the man he'd chosen to become. "Waiting," I said. "For what?" he smirked, but it was thin, fragile. "For you," I answered. He frowned. "I don't get it." "You will," Margaret said, stepping forward. Tyler blinked at her. "Who are you?" "Attorney Chen. I represent your grandfather." His jaw twitched. "Represent him for what?" Before she could answer, a deputy stepped into the hallway and called, "Case 14B, Jenkins versus Jenkins." Tyler's face drained of color. "Pops, what is this?" I felt something in me tighten, not anger, not victory, but something heavier, something final. "Come inside," I said quietly. "Let's get this over with." The courtroom wasn't dramatic, no jury, no gallery. Just a magistrate, a clerk, a couple benches, and the four of us. Tyler sat across from me, bouncing his knee, cracking his knuckles, glancing back and forth like a cornered animal. When the magistrate asked if we were ready to proceed, Margaret rose. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, "we are." Tyler didn't have a lawyer. He hadn't expected to need one. That arrogance was part of what brought him here. The magistrate looked at me first. "Mr. Jenkins, can you explain the reason for this petition?" My throat tightened. I swallowed. Rosa gave me a tiny nod from the bench behind me. "I'm here," I said slowly, "because my grandson took $90,000 from me. Through unauthorized access, through manipulation, and through exploitation of trust." The magistrate raised an eyebrow. "Do you have evidence?" Margaret stepped forward, setting the binder on the table with a soft thump. "Yes, Your Honor, substantial evidence." She opened it page by page, walking the magistrate through the timeline, the transfers, the IP logs, the photos of Tyler entering my passwords, the clipped stills of him pocketing my documents. Then came the audio recording. The moment that would break everything open. The room filled with Tyler's voice. "You won't even notice it's gone." He flinched as if he'd been struck. "That's taken out of context," he said, his voice cracking. The magistrate didn't look up. Context doesn't change the words. Tyler turned toward me. "Pops, come on, why are you doing this? We're family." Those words went through me like a blade. But I kept my eyes steady. "You stopped being family," I said, "the moment you stole from me." He shook his head wildly. "I was going to pay it back." "When?" I asked. "Tell me when." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked down. And that was when the full weight of the moment hit him. His breathing sped up. His hands shook. The bravado evaporated like morning dew. "You set me up," he whispered. "No," I said quietly. "You set yourself up months ago. I just stopped covering for you." Margaret turned to the magistrate. "Your Honor, based on the evidence, we are seeking a full financial injunction, restitution, and a protective order to prevent further exploitation." Tyler snapped his head up. "A protective? Are you serious? Like I'm some criminal?" The magistrate folded his hands. "Based on this evidence, Mr. Jenkins, you are." Tyler slumped back in his chair, stunned. For the first time in months, I felt taller. Not proud. Not triumphant. just steady, like I'd finally been allowed to stand back up after being held under water too long. The magistrate reviewed everything in silence. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Jenkins, you've been through something no one your age should ever have to endure. This court acknowledges that wrongdoing occurred. A ruling will be issued." Tyler's voice broke. "Pops, please." I closed my eyes. And inside them, every fishing trip, every birthday, every Sunday lunch, every moment I ever held him when he cried. Then December. The withdrawal slip. The break-in. The lies. The stealing. The entitlement. The contempt. I opened my eyes. "You made your choice," I said. The magistrate nodded once and dismissed the room. Outside, the summer heat hit me like opening an oven door. Rosa walked on one side of me, Daniel on the other. Margaret tucked the binder under her arm. I expected to feel relief, or anger, or triumph. But what I felt instead was a kind of emptiness. A quiet, deep ache. Because revenge isn't clean. Justice isn't painless. And victory doesn't erase the cost. But it was only the beginning of Tyler's downfall. What happened after that hearing? The fallout, the confrontation with his mother, the calls from the bank, the consequences he never saw coming. That's what Part 10 is for. And I'll tell you exactly how everything ended. The ruling came 2 weeks after the hearing. 2 weeks of pacing my living room, drinking too much bad coffee, and trying not to let my mind wander into places that smelled like regret. Because regret, it creeps. It shows up at the edges of your thoughts like mildew, and I'd spent enough months drowning in it. On a hot July morning, the kind where the air over Dayton feels thick enough to chew, I got the envelope. Official seal, court letterhead. My hands shook a little when I opened it. The magistrate granted. Full financial injunction against Tyler. Restitution order for the entire amount, $90, $412.55. Protective order, barring him from accessing any accounts or property of mine. Referral to the county prosecutor for potential criminal charges related to elder financial exploitation. I sat at the kitchen table, the one Mary and I bought from Sears in '86, and let the weight of it settle. Not joy, not sorrow, something steadier, something seasoned. A kind of justice that felt like it belonged to the world more than to me. Because what Tyler did wasn't just wrong. It was dangerous. It was predatory. And it could have been fatal if he drained my accounts a little faster, a little deeper. But now the law had a hold on him. And it wasn't letting go. 3 days later, Lisa came over. She didn't call first. Didn't knock. Just stepped inside with her car keys still in her hand, and her eyes rimmed red. "You should have told me," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was broken. I motioned her to sit. My knees weren't in great shape that day, but I lowered myself across from her. "I didn't want to hurt you," I said. "But he's my son." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "My boy, and he did this. He really did this." I nodded slow, heavy. She covered her mouth with her hand and shook. I kept thinking he was just lost, just hanging with the wrong people, just making mistakes. "We all make mistakes," I said gently. "What he did wasn't a mistake." "No," she whispered, "it was." She stayed for 2 hours, crying on and off, asking questions she already knew the answers to. She asked if she'd failed him, asked if she'd been blind, asked if she needed to cut him off completely. I didn't tell her what to do. That wasn't my place, not anymore. But I did tell her the truth. "He's grown," I said. "Grown people do what they choose." She nodded, wiped her face, and left with a hug that felt like something inside her had cracked in half. I hated that part. More than anything else in this entire ordeal, that moment. Revenge never warned me that collateral damage can look you in the eye and share your blood. About a week later, I got a call from the credit union. "Mr. Jenkins," the fraud investigator said, "we completed our internal review. Given the evidence you and the court provided, we're restoring a portion of the stolen funds." I gripped the receiver harder. A portion. Yes, sir. $34,000 will be returned immediately. The remaining balance is subject to the restitution order. I thanked him, hung up, and just stared at the phone. 34,000. Not the full 90. Not what Mary and I spent decades saving. But enough. Enough to breathe again. Enough to keep the lights on, the heat running, the mortgage paid. Enough to live, not just survive. And Tyler, the prosecutor sent him a letter in August. Then another. Then a summons. He ignored the first two. He didn't ignore the third. The day he walked into the county building for his intake interview, Rosa texted me one line. He looked scared. I didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Truth is, I felt nothing at all. Just quiet. A young man who thought he was untouchable had finally learned that the world had edges, and he'd walked straight off one. He didn't go to prison. Not yet, anyway. First offense, no violence, restitution plan accepted. They put him on probation with financial monitoring and mandatory counseling, the kind that forces you to sit in a room and look at yourself in a way mirrors don't allow. Lisa visits him sometimes. I don't. I'm not angry anymore. And I'm not waiting for an apology. I don't need one. Some wounds don't heal by hearing someone say sorry. Some wounds heal by finally knowing you weren't crazy. You weren't weak. You weren't slipping. You were right. As for me, life settled back into something like peace. Not the peace I had before, no, that's gone. But a quieter peace, a learned peace. The kind a man feels when he's walked through fire and come out the other side singed, but standing. These days, I sit by the same kitchen window with a cup of Folgers, watching the mail truck go by around 11:15 every morning. I tend the little corner of Mary's rose garden that still insists on blooming. I stretch my knees before I get out of bed. I lock the doors twice at night, not out of fear, but habit. And sometimes, when the sun hits just right, I think about the man I still am. The man I proved myself to be when I struck back after 6 long months. Not perfect, not invincible, but steady, capable, nobody's victim. That's the truth, plain and simple. And that's where I'll leave you.